to Sustainability in the Sea.
Hey, thanks for having me, Carissa.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be able to talk about Surfrider. They were one of the first nonprofit organizations I learned about when I was starting my ocean conservation career.
Awesome.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about your relationship with the ocean. I mean, pre-Surfrider, like, did you grow up surfing? Did you grow up underwater?
I pretty much did. Um, when I was a toddler, my parents moved to Saipan,
Wow.
which is a small island in the South Pacific in the Mariana Islands. And my dad was teaching high school science there, and we hung out with the indigenous Chamorro people who the kids were at the school there. So I don't remember learning how to swim. I was so young,
Hmm.
and I was, immersed in the ocean since, 2 years old, and uh,
Wow.
and so that was a formative experience because we were just like in and amongst the ocean all day, every day. My dad ended up teaching oceanography. So it's kind of around ocean science and the oceans all my life. And after Saipan, we moved to Laguna Beach, which is where I live now. Um, so, I've kind of always lived like three blocks from the ocean, which I feel really lucky about. So I grew up swimming, boogie boarding. I was a junior lifeguard,
Yeah.
surfer, fisherman. And in fact, I'm still doing that today. I just like my hair's wet because I just came in from a stand-up paddle.
Oh, amazing. So it's
So
part of your
I'm,
life, your whole life.
yeah,
And it's also so beautiful to hear like you're obviously Pacific Ocean focused, right? If you grew up, you're in Laguna and then you grew up in Saipan, and to be immersed in like ocean communities like what is underway in Saipan must have been such a connector of how important like the entire Pacific Ocean is as a connector for ocean conservation.
yeah, absolutely. And the Chamorro people were so in tune with the ocean, like so many
Mm-hmm.
indigenous sort of island cultures, they just had sort of a relationship with the ocean that was so intimate. I
Yeah.
think compared to ours, they were just in it and amongst it. Their ancestors were ocean voyagers, so they knew how to navigate like the Polynesians by
Mm-hmm.
wave, wind, and star. So just sort of being around people who are that in touch and in tune left a big impression.
Right.
And I think, they view themselves as part of the ocean ecosystem, not separate
Mm-hmm.
from it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was relevant too.
We have so much to learn from them. I feel like it's
Oh
such
my
a
God.
gift, such a
So
gift to grow up and or to live and work in Hawaii and work alongside Pacific people. And I feel like if all of us embodied that being part of nature, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in.
yeah, I learned a incredible stat recently, which I had to like double check because I didn't even believe it, which is that 80% of the world's biodiversity is under indigenous management,
Mm-hmm.
despite only having 20% of the like Earth's surface to manage and
Mm-hmm.
5% of the population. So they're pretty much the only ones who are doing it right.
Yeah. And the more we can give management agency and power back to them for the ocean, like the better off we're going to be. I mean, you guys just got a
Yeah.
sanctuary offshore.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's right. And there's, I think finally some movement in the right direction in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And Chumash National Marine Sanctuary that was just established off of Southern California coastline is the first sort of national marine sanctuary that has like that's tribally led.
Yeah, so beautiful. And I feel like, yeah, we're finally getting there with some of these things.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I love that Surfrider's model, you have this decentralized hub model for folks listening. Surfrider is national. And if you're in it, how many chapters do you guys have around the nation?
Yeah. 200 chapters and clubs. So
Amazing.
we should talk about our high school and college clubs at some point because that's the most exciting part of our network, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working here in ocean conservation. So we've worked with the whole Hawaii Hub, we've worked with the Oahu chapter, then we've worked with the University of Hawaii Manoa chapter, and like all those
Yep.
different levels create this like pipeline of engagement for communities to work. And so, like, how did you, when you were finding your place in ocean conservation, what drew you to Surfrider?
Yeah, I mean, I interned at Surfrider as a grad student.
Amazing.
The Surfrider, this is our 40th anniversary. So we were
Yeah.
founded in 1984. So like as a teenager in high school, because they were founded in Southern California, I was kind of aware of them, but I didn't really know what they were up to. And I went to college on the East Coast, and then I went back to grad school in North Carolina. So I've spent some time in the Atlantic also. And during grad school, like so many grad students, I was broke.
Yep.
Uh, I came home to Laguna Beach, and my dad ran an ocean science summer camp, ocean adventure camp. So I worked for him to make some money. And I was grad student. I was trying to find an internship to do something meaningful and build my resume. And so I volunteered at Surfrider, which is down in San Clemente. That was in 1995. And so I spent the summer there, sort of volunteering, in between teaching kids about tide pools.
It's honestly one of the going to a Surfrider chapter meeting is like being around people who just get it. And then you end up, it's a place to create friends. It's a place to, then there's all these opportunities to volunteer and take on leadership roles, which I really appreciate that framework. And I think for folks listening, like if they wanted to get engaged in a chapter meeting or get engaged in a local chapter, what can they expect from a Surfrider like volunteer engagement?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're right. We have this grassroots network, which is really a big community. And I just wrapped up this weekend our 40th anniversary summit, and there was like
Congratulations.
yeah, thanks. There was 400 Surfrider activists there. Some were students, but and a lot of them were volunteers. But some of those volunteers uh, are dive researchers. Some of them are university professors. Some of them work for Sea Grant. So it's a really like from a career standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
volunteering at Surfrider it's a great way to start building your network if you're
Mm-hmm.
interested in ocean stuff. Um, and so our volunteer activities range widely. You could show up for a beach cleanup, and spend a couple hours. Helping clean up our beaches and most importantly documenting what we find because we
Yeah.
use those results to like guide policy, so it's sort of a data collection thing. We have people who run the beach cleanups. We have ocean friendly restaurants and ocean friendly gardens program. We do water sampling, all
Mm-hmm.
kinds of different volunteer activities. We launched a new program called the Climate Action Program, where we're restoring coastal habitats like dunes and wetlands and seagrasses and mangroves where we have them. Um, and so, one of the things that's great about Surfrider is you can show up, roll up your sleeves, and get something done.
Mm-hmm.
And by showing up, if you want to connect with that volunteer sort of community, there's all kinds of opportunities to increase your engagement depending on your interest.
Yeah. And I think that, when you're just starting out, it can be so intimidating to figure out what you want to do. But Surfrider has these different focal areas. You can test out water quality, you can clean up beaches, but you can also maybe restore a wetland. And then you get to discover what you like and figure out where you best fit in the collective movement.
That's right. When I give advice to folks, including my 23-year-old twins who graduated from college in April or May this last year, I'm like, just get out there and try things. And
Mm-hmm.
internships are a great way to do that. And low level jobs, entry level jobs, another great way because you kind of have to. I think you have to sort of poke around and test different opportunities to find the one that makes sense for you.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned that you celebrated 40 years this weekend. I'm
Yep.
so proud of you guys. I saw Dr. Ayana was speaking up there with you,
Yeah.
and to see all the work that you've done throughout my 30 years on this planet has been beautiful. And so, what were some successful milestones that having everyone together focused on celebrating at the 40th anniversary?
Yeah, it's interesting. We kind of I talked about it at the event, but like I kind of looked at it like you're a 40-year-old human.
Yeah.
Usually at 40, it's kind of like the midlife crisis,
Yeah.
or midlife success. And it's an opportunity to kind of reflect on like where you've gotten to.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, And we've built this network of 200 chapters and clubs. We have 8 international affiliates. So there were people there from Senegal, Japan, Australia, Europe. So we're really proud of sort of this network we've built. Um, we have, all kinds of recent sort of successes just in the last couple months through the network, like helping establish the Chumash National Marine Sanctuary. Um, there was an effort in Florida, believe it or not, to the governor tried to like sell coastal state parks to hotel owners and golf courses.
Yes, I heard about that. It was stopped.
And it was stopped because Surfrider and many other local environmental organizations like rallied in such rapid and massive protest. They just walked away from that terrible idea. So there's still work to defend our coasts
Hmm.
from bad ideas. Um, we helped get it, relevant to Hawaii. The Hawaii legislature passed a bill to fund a North Shore coastal erosion management plan to the tune of
Yes.
$1 million. Uh, a house at Cammy's just fell in the water a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
which so we have real serious coastal erosion problem down there. Um, we launched this climate action program this year, so we're pretty excited about getting volunteers out there restoring our coastlines to make them more resilient. So just all kinds of positive impact across the network.
Yeah, something I really respect is the deep investment in the intersection of ocean and climate resilience. And so the climate action program is really going to be helping build back nature, right? And what is your vision
That's
for it
right.
and how did it come about? Because something that I think is really valuable for listeners is, we are figuring it out how to restore nature, and these ideas, when they get stood up and implemented as programs, like these are really just people who had an idea that they're now bringing to life. And so what was that process with the climate action program?
That's right. And you know, climate change is such a, massive problem. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
affect everything, or challenge, I should say. And so it's easy to be overwhelmed and not know where to start. Uh, and we as an organization actually have that same kind of thing. Like, do we focus on emissions? Do we support community choice energy programs? Are we trying to get people to ride their bikes instead of drive to the surf spots? What are we doing? And we took some time and really decided that we think there's 3 things that Surfrider is sort of uniquely positioned to do. Um, One of them is to get involved in restoring coastal habitats, and I'll talk a little bit about that. The other is to help communities adapt to sea level rise and increased storms. So, like the North
Mm-hmm.
Shore's got to do something because it's fallen
Right.
in the water, and as is houses in North Carolina and other places. So coastal adaptation, and those are linked in some ways. And then passing good local, state, and federal policy
Mm-hmm.
to advance climate action, because we need to do this at a huge scale. Uh, I was at a conference at New York, a talk at New York Climate Week a couple weeks ago, and there was a woman from NOAA there, the National Ocean and Atmosphere Administration, the big federal agency that does ocean stuff. And they because of money that was in the Inflation Reduction Act, the worst name for a climate bill. Um,
I know, I think it helped them get it passed though. This is the
yeah, no,
branding
it
of
did, it did, it worked. Uh,
but it's definitely the biggest climate bill ever, even though the name doesn't describe it at all that way.
Yeah. So she said they had a $500 million fund for coastal resilience projects in America.
Yeah.
And that's exciting. They got $16 billion in proposals.
Yeah, the need is so much.
So,
I mean,
so massive.
yes.
And by the same token, there are very few good examples out there of projects.
Hmm.
It's really all just starting. And so um, we led a project at a place called Surfers Point in Ventura to move an eroding bike path back, restore the sort of cobble river mouth and plant dunes there. And it is a spectacularly beautiful place with this beautiful beach ecosystem now, and there's a surf spot right out front and a river mouth. So if your listeners Google Surfers Point Managed Retreat, uh, and it's one of the few really good case studies on what we need to do everywhere.
Hmm.
Um, And like you said, I think it's a really good point. In the past, staying out of harm's way was good enough. Just don't build stuff in harm's way.
Yeah,
Uh, but now our coasts are changing, and we're going to have to adapt to climate change. And you're right, we get to reinvent the future of our coasts, and it's daunting, but it's also exciting.
yeah,
It's on us, and so we need people with who love our coastlines, who have a vision for what they could look like, and then the willingness to advocate for that, and government tends to be pretty conservative. They want to stay within the bounds of the existing rules, and that's fine. That's important. That's how the system works. But the existing rules no longer are going to address the needs we have.
right.
And Surfrider and others are out there saying, dare to retreat from the coast in Ventura, and we'll help rally the public to make that possible and
Hmm.
encourage funding. And that's happening. And we're doing another project at San Onofre, which is a famous surf spot in Southern California, and a project in Oregon. And so we're focused on these case studies where we can show what's possible.
Right.
And at the same time, um, you know, we're out there helping plant dunes and restore these coastal habitats. And that we've destroyed so many of them to like for whitewater views from our condos or for beach access. It was kind of somewhat innocent, I think, but it turns out that those dunes protect places from flooding, and now there's case studies where you can be like, intact dunes, town has very little flooding, next
Yeah.
door no dunes, billions of dollars of damage. So they make our communities more resilient to flooding, and they're also habitat. They're also absorbing carbon. So it's kind of a win-win-win. And so we got all these folks that live in these coastal communities who are love them, and they're excited to make a difference. And so we're, helping them organize to do projects like this, and
Yeah.
super
It
exciting.
it
Yeah.
also is like these types of, the more you can share about them through an episode like this, people get to learn from it and say, oh, it worked for them in this ecosystem, it can work for us if we change these types of things, because we're in this building piece of it right now, which is
Yeah.
exciting and amazing. And I think that when people hear, oh, we need resilient coastlines, they're like, what does that mean? But to be able to say that means going and restoring these dunes, that's going to require a ton of volunteers coming out this weekend, and you can be part of it, and it's a collective effort. That's what resilient coastlines look like taking these really big global goals we have and just bringing them down to the people level is what I think that the bridge that Surfrider provides with so many of your grassroots activations.
That's right. And you can go out there. There's dune planting projects that we did in Puerto Rico 10 years ago, and it was a flat beach that had been mined. And you go back there today, and there's 25-foot dunes full of sea grapes and habitat. And it's really satisfying to see that the work you did uh, making a difference in the long run. So you can,
Yeah.
you sort of actually can see what you're achieving, which is pretty nice.
I'm so excited to see how the climate action program scales up.
Yeah, us too. We like, I mean, our chapter's been doing different versions of this around the country, but we just started this 6 months ago, and it's going great guns.
That's awesome. Something that you mentioned and that I want more nonprofits to look to Surfrider for is like, you guys are not afraid to engage in policy, and actually it's a defining pillar of your mission. And the beach cleanup data ends up informing policy. It can be brought up to Capitol Hill Ocean Week in DC, and you can talk to congressional members about what you want. And recently, I know that Surfrider was instrumental in suing Exxon Mobil for their
Yeah.
disinformation around single-use plastics. Can you tell us a little bit about that fight? I know it has just reached headlines, but there was years going towards this, and what the goal is of this lawsuit.
Yeah, no, and you're right. I mean, we'll never sort of beach clean our way out of this problem or plant enough dunes by
No way.
ourselves. Like we need big systemic change, things like the Inflation Reduction Act. So we try to like ladder up from the activities on the ground to local, state, and federal policy, and we can get a lot done that way. Uh, and occasionally, when that doesn't work, walk softly and carry a big stick, talk softly and carry a big stick. And the big stick is legal action. And we have a really savvy and potent legal team. And sometimes that's necessary, especially with these big corporations who, frankly, haven't been acting responsibly for decades. And not surprisingly, Exxon is one of them. And I think one of the things that's interesting about this lawsuit, so we sued Exxon, which they are the suppliers of the base products of plastic, which is natural gas and oil. And so there's a link between fossil fuels and plastics, which I think is important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they have been promoting recycling as the solution to our plastic problem for decades. We all have a recycling bin in our house. Um, I laugh because, for many years when I say, "What do you do?" "Oh, I work at Surfrider." People always look at me at like a cocktail party and they're like, "Well, I recycle,"
Literally.
like literally, like they're trying to tell me like I'm some like the Pope of the environment or something. And ironically, we've all been doing it.
Yeah.
Me too. Um, Only about 5% of that stuff that we put in that bin in our house actually gets recycled. So it's been a complete myth. Um, like climate change and the whole carbon footprint calculator, these are things that industry did to shift the burden of the problem to the individual instead of them. So they make this cheap, disposable plastic at almost no cost. It's convenient, but then they hand that to us, and then we're responsible for it, or it ends up in our environment and pollutes it. And now we know it's everywhere, right? In the
Mm-hmm.
air, in our bodies, in our lungs. It's a disaster. And so, like big tobacco, the big plastic and big oil have known this for decades,
Mm-hmm.
and they have been, sort of deceptively supporting recycling as the answer. So, similar to the tobacco lawsuits, we're suing them to try to achieve a couple things. Stop lying about recycling. Let's be truthful about that, which in its own right, I think will change behavior. And second of all, they're liable for decades of plastic pollution while they were telling us this was the solution. So, they need to compensate sort of the public for all of this waste, the 95% of stuff that didn't get recycled. And there's also kind of an interesting environmental justice component to this too, because for decades we were taking our recycling and shipping it to Southeast Asia,
Mm-hmm.
um, where we just assumed that it was being recycled, but in most cases it was not. There's like whole communities of trash pickers that pick through mountains of disposable plastic that's ours
Mm-hmm.
and living in horrendous conditions to try to find the tiny little bit that might have economic value.
Yeah.
So we're just pushing our problem on others.
Yeah. Which is, after we look at decades, that's why we have it in our oceans, in our food, in our lungs, in our clouds, in our placentas. All these things
Yeah.
are now it's become a problem at a scale that requires like extreme urgent accountability to these corporations. And this is an issue that impacts everyone. I mean, we have the environmental justice layer of waste colonialism that you described. We have petrochemical pollution impacting vulnerable and marginalized communities. Then we have like our food systems being polluted. And I think that the more we can make the link to human health, the more we can take progressive steps on this, because we've been sounding the alarm of, oh, it's harming the environment, it's harming wildlife. But now it's like it's also harming your health and your families and your ability to survive and thrive in your communities. And hopefully we see a acceleration on that piece of it.
Yeah, I think we will, and you're right. I mean, as you well know, almost every week a new study comes out with more bad news about plastic. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't actually, I have to admit, I didn't read the article yet, but there was a headline that is they're finding it in dolphin breath.
Oh my gosh,
I
didn't see
don't know if
that
you
one.
saw that.
Didn't see that one. Yes.
It's quite a headline. But it's just more of the same in a sense, which is that this stuff is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to solve that.
Yeah. And something you touched on is like it's been put on the individual, right? I mean, I was 21 trying to fit my trash into a mason jar, carrying the entire burden of pollution on my back because I was a passionate environmentalist. Now I think people understand that there's this deception and insidious disinformation campaign by big oil. How can all of us listening and all environmentalists help support this collective legal action that you guys are doing? Do we need to sound the alarm? Do we need to talk about it more? What can we do?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bunch of things folks can do. They can talk about it.
Yeah.
That helps the raising that awareness, because the lawsuit's important, public pressure is equally important. Um, I think reducing your plastic footprint is still worth doing. It gives you agency, and the exercise you went through, it opens your eyes to the extent of the problem,
Right.
you know, and but yeah, I say this all the time, you walk to a grocery store, which we all do, and
Mm-hmm.
if you walk through those sliding doors and stand there and scan the building, there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of items inside that store, and pretty much every single one of them is wrapped in plastic,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so we can't expect everyone to avoid everything in that store. You even go over to the fruits and vegetables, and some of those are wrapped in, I've seen potatoes wrapped in plastic. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So that, like, as an individual, to try to fight that system that's wrapping every single food item in
Mm-hmm.
plastic, it's unrealistic. So we need to figure out how to redo the system.
Mm-hmm. Has
Uh,
Surfrider considered engaging? I know you have so many different policy focal areas. Have you guys considered engaging like in the subsidy piece? I mean, we know we subsidize plastic
yeah,
and petrochemicals and all these things. It's such an enormous reason why we see so much plastic in our daily lives, but that's a big hill to climb, right?
that's right. And it is right. Like, part of the problem is that single-use plastic is too cheap.
Right.
And so the easiest solution for business is to use cheap plastic, and that's what we want to change. One of the ways to do that is there are a series of bills that are being passed, mostly at the state level, called extended producer responsibility.
Yeah.
It's a wonky term, but expending it, uh, getting the expanding the responsibility to the producer, or extending the responsibility to the producer means that the producer of the plastic is responsible for the end life of the plastic. So the same way that, like, Apple wants to take your iPhone back, um, we want the plastic producers to have to take the plastic back.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they're responsible for the end life, uh, and they either have a mandate to recycle it or use less, or it's going to cost them, that will start to shift the system. And so that could take the form of a tax. If you don't, you need to pay for the disposal. Um, Hopefully it'll result in reduction of plastic use. So that's one way of getting to sort of the sort of overly cheap or subsidized plastics. Um, it doesn't really address, like, some of these fundamental challenges with, like, microplastics. I think that's like a materials problem.
Mm-hmm.
But hopefully, as laws continue to ratchet down and change the requirements. I mean, I would love to see the future where we have some sort of non-toxic plastic requirement,
Yeah.
um, or nature-based plastics or alternative materials that
Mm-hmm.
don't cause all these problems.
Yeah.
Is, I think, what we ultimately need to go.
We have a single-use plastic ban for takeout in Hawaii at the city and county level, and it's being kind of like used as like the groundswell example to get it to the state level, and then you can go
Yep.
federally for that. Um, One last question on policy is, we try to offer storytelling and media to these large scale high impact campaigns because of the emphasis for collectivism, right? You
Yep.
have a track record of high impact campaigns across many different chapters and likely before you were engaged with Surfrider. What are some key ingredients to what makes a campaign successful in your experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a, like, Sun Tzu, The Art of War. He has a quote that, tactics without strategy are like the noise before defeat. in
Mm,
strategy without tactics, you'll win, but it just takes a long time. And so it's really about strategy. Uh, it's about understanding what your goals are, understanding who the decision makers are, understanding what motivates those decision makers, and then sort of building momentum and power, usually people power, to alter the relations of power so you can get the decision you want. Um, so it's Civics 101. But it requires understanding the process, which usually takes some homework. Um, and if you think about a city council, it's a good place to start. It's about understanding who's on that council, how they vote, what influences them, and then sort of deciding what you want to achieve. We want to get rid of, single-use takeout, and then building a argument around that, and then ultimately persuading those decision makers.
mhm.
So, and you can do that at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. It's really the same process. It just becomes a more sophisticated effort,
Yeah.
uh, and you need to rally more people to get it done.
Yeah.
But and that makes it sound simple, right? It's a lot of work. It's a lot of reading reports and drafting ordinances and talking to people, but that is the sort of way to do it. Um, and we have a lot of science and policy and legal experts at Surfrider that help our network do that. So if you're a local citizen who cares, we have the tools to help you be an effective advocate.
Yeah. And I won't, we need millions of ocean advocates. Um,
Yes.
we interviewed a climate activist who was part of helping pass that single-use plastic bill in the early days of this podcast. And she shared that what changed the landscape of the passing of that was actually the election. It was the city council election. And I know
Yes.
Surfrider is engaged on a campaign to get out the vote. There's a lot of listeners right now that might be voting for the first time, that might not understand the way that voting impacts climate and our ocean conservation political landscape. Over the course of the elections you've been a part of, how important is voting for what we're able to accomplish for ocean protection?
Thank you for bringing that up. It's the most important thing you can do right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you have any level of government, if you have unsympathetic ears on those decision making boards or councils, it's a real uphill battle. And we want those that aren't supporting the environment to lose, and we want the ones who are supporting the environment to win. And so voting is super important. Um, the largest voting bloc in America is the I didn't vote.
Yeah.
So, and if we had higher voter participation, everything would change.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the ultimate accountability for all these decision makers. And so, yeah, we highly encourage people to get out there and exercise that really important right that we all have. Um, you know, there's all kinds of resources out there if you don't know who to vote for or what to vote for, because it can be a little complex, right? There's president and that's pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of other people on the ballot, your state and local representatives, that are really important too.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so there's organizations like Lead Locally, and others that you can, go to get information or talk to your friends. Our friends that Protect Our Winners, the snowboarding group, they say friends don't lend friends, not vote. So, getting out, encouraging your friends to vote is important too.
Yeah, I'll put some of those links that Chad referenced in the show notes. Yeah, thank you for emphasizing that and for making that connection, because we can't we're advocating for a political landscape that allows us to make progress on these issues, right? That's what we're really organizing for.
Yeah,
um
they shouldn't be partisan either, right? Clean water, healthy beaches, a stable climate, all sides should be rooting for those things.
right, exactly. um how can people who want to maybe get involved with Surfrider, what's a quick next step they can do to find their chapter or to sign up to volunteer at the end of this episode?
Yeah, surfrider.org. It
Hmm.
all starts there. There's a volunteer page on there that lists all of our active volunteer opportunities. You can search by zip code. Um,
Awesome.
you can find what's happening locally. Undoubtedly, like this coming weekend, there'll be beach cleanups or chapter meetings or movie nights or dune planting projects taking place. We do about 3,000 activities a year. So there's a lot happening out there. And as you said, we've got chapters in most places. And so there's coastal places. So
Mhm.
so you can sort of connect with them.
Yeah, awesome. And then Chad, I finish every episode with the same question for guests. It's awesome to see how folks approach this question, but it's if you could put something on a billboard for all, or a message on a billboard for all of the most powerful people and powerful decision makers in the world to see, what would your message say?
We're coming for you.
Iconic.